welcome to What the Heck's, your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 Underworlds curious folks now converted to regular players. I'm your co-host, Davey, and with me today is my tanned by the Italian sun co-host, Brian. How are you?
What's up? How's it going?
And nursing a dog back to health co-host, Skylar. How are you?
Doing well, and thankfully I can say so is Rhea, my dog.
Oh, good. Yeah, the cone of shame is a real trial and tribulation for any dog. So hopefully that's not on too much longer.
Word. Off this weekend, theoretically.
Okay,
and that is not early enough for her.
Awesome. Well, we are recording, for your context, we're recording on the 25th of September. We are eagerly anticipating Death Gorge, hopefully coming down. We got that preview. I know you guys are hyped, with good reason. I'm hyped. So, but we're looking at what to do in the meantime. And what we were kicking around a few ideas, and Brian came up with one that we want to run with. So, Brian, you want to talk about kind of the thesis of today's episode?
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of a crash course of, if you've heard of Underworlds or you've seen the cool models that always come out for Underworlds, we're going to try and give you an idea of what the game is, what is a Death Gorge, and how the game operates, kind of what you can expect. Just really break it down for any layman, just trying to figure out what this game is and what it's going to look like if they get into it.
Yeah.
So we'll be breaking down what the game is, the setting, what you need to get started, and what living with the game actually looks like realistically.
Yeah, and if you're somebody who does not have these questions because you've been playing for a long time, we thought this would make a good sort of tool. We one of the things that we really try to do is kind of grow that community. What we'd like to do is give something, give those community leaders out there something they can put in their back pocket and toss out, like, hey, you interested? Like, check out What the Heck's episode 115, or check out, we'll have a couple of things, resources, and that sort of thing. So
share that link around.
Yeah, exactly. Pass it on to somebody who might be interested, and they can give it a listen to figure out what it means. So
let us speak and pitch for you.
Right. So that said, you may be listening to this. You may have received this episode from somebody who thinks you might like the game. So we are going to lead off with community shout outs. And that kind of comes back to this idea of like the community in this game being really important. And this is where we kind of highlight some things that are not things that we create, but other creators, other members of the community have worked on, and that we want to highlight. For me, and this is a little bit more deep content, maybe not beginner stuff, but I couldn't let it go by because I love the article so much. Path to Glory, I think Bacon Board led this article. It was a breakdown of the Void Curse Thralls deck. Man, it was just A+ content. I really enjoyed reading it. The only thing that I felt disappointed about is it has got more of the Void Cursed tricks out and about, more of the breakdown, because I don't think it's really flying under the radar anymore, but it was. I've really enjoyed using it a lot with all kinds of different warbands. It's been one of my favorite things in the current meta lately, and he breaks it down in a really great way.
Love that deck.
Yeah. Anybody else got something they want to shout at community wise?
Yeah, I'll jump in here with the official christening of a new website. This is, we've shouted out Fish Mode in the past, who is somebody that is hell-bent on building this community, and he has a website dedicated to it. Previously, a blog, but now a proper domain, spentglory.com. And there are multiple articles out there for anybody getting started, so it's a really good shout-out for this episode. And most recently, he's added he's been writing quite a bit, actually.
It is impressive.
There are 5 entries just in September alone so far. But most recently, can I use this old warband, A Beginner's Guide to the Harrowdeep season? So if you have questions about bringing warbands from Harrowdeep into the game today, that article exists for you, as well as ones for all of the seasons prior to Harrowdeep, and a new entry in what he's calling the Contender series. The latest one is on deck building and Gambit specifically, but the Contender series explores all the different elements of like improving your skills with the game. Hence, Contender, right? Is
Right.
You've kind of got your sea legs, and you're trying to figure out how to become best mate on the ship. No. I didn't know where to take sea legs.
Trying to take the helm.
Exactly. So spentglory.com. Can't shout it out enough. Happy to see a new domain, or an official domain. So It's no longer just on a blog. It's a nice fresh coat of official paint.
Yeah, congratulations. I hope you smashed a big bottle of champagne over your computer screen to really get it christened in like a ship setting out for the open sea, just to continue Skylar's nautical metaphors.
Skylar, have you been on a boat?
Yes.
Question mark. All right. Our next section is what the heck is going on with you? I am going to just say that I've been continuing to play in League, been really enjoying it, and been enjoying playing some matchups with my son still. So we got to bust out some old, and we had like a Claw Pack versus Magor's battle, which was kind of amazing. It was down to like Zarkus and I think Kin Whisper were just staring at each other, trying to figure out who was going to kill who at the very end. So very fun.
Very murderous game.
It was. Yeah. Everyone was going down. So I think at one point, Emmett I said, well, I know you're going to get at least 3 glory for collateral damage. He's like, well, 4 people aren't dead yet. And I was like, oh, they will be. Like, just wait a little bit. It's going to happen. So
Patience, young one.
Yeah, exactly. Skylar, what about you?
I promised our listeners that the next time they heard from us, I would have a date for the Madtown Throwdown Q4. And that date is Saturday, November 11th.
All right.
We'll be at Noble Knight Games in Fitchburg, Wisconsin. We'll be playing Nemesis in best of 3 format. And as of the posting of this episode, we have a page built out for the event as well. So that'll be included in the show notes.
All right. Little Veterans Day battle there. So awesome. Looking forward to that. Guys, I just heard about the Russians running an event it was Nemesis Alliance format. So it was like a Nemesis team format. So your team was 3 warbands, and then you had to pick 3 different decks to pair them with. I was like,
I see.
That might be the way we get our team event off, because it's logistically difficult otherwise. But that's something that reduces the barrier a little bit. And boy, have I been wanting to do a team event for a while now. So
yeah.
Watch this space.
Noted.
Brian, what about you? Anything going on with you?
Having listened to the Nova recap episode, I wish I could have been a part of it, but I went straight from Nova to Europe for my honeymoon. So me and my wife had a blast going around Venice and cruising around the Mediterranean. But would have loved to have been on that episode, but it was wonderful getting to listen to you guys do all the work, and also listening to the Battle Mallet guys and their breakdown. That was a great time. So love Nova. I'm having a few beers out of my Nova Stein as piece of awesome swag I got from the con. Yeah, that's been what's up with me. Just got back, hit the ground running, straight back into work. So finally got done with my work weekend, and now can kind of enjoy and take all the experiences in and all the fun interactions that we've had. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of covers us. Let's head towards that main topic. This is our Underworlds crash course. This is if you know nothing or very little about Underworlds, this is how you're going to get started. So Brian kind of had the brainchild for this, so we're going to kind of pass the reins to him. Brian, you want to? I should also say, like, some of the inspiration for this. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've kind of had an influx of folks on the Discord I mentioned in the last episode, and some of those are brand new players. It's been really exciting. It's really awesome to see that energy that the new folks bring. They're so excited about getting that first game in. And Here I'm thinking of, I think we said your dad's Squig recently got his first game in, and Jake was getting ready. It looked like some Skittershanks claw pack was hitting the painting table. So there's been some others too, but just seeing those new folks all fired up and ready to play, we're like, all right, how do we get more of these? So
yeah, there's with Warhammer in general, there's Underworlds kind of has its own niche within Warhammer, and there's a bunch of questions from outsiders looking in, and I realized how little Underworlds can kind of speak for itself, and the just like Warhammer community, the online website and resource for articles for everything Warhammer, sometimes fall short of getting the full message and understanding across, because it has a dedicated fan base that we have been playing. Davey and Phil both have been playing since Shadespire, since it originally came out. And a lot of people still are confused. They're like, I thought this game was called Shadespire. Some of them don't realize that it's Warhammer Underworlds, and Shadespire, Deathgorge, all yada yada is the seasonal name. So I figured that there was a lot of general questions among the community, and I thought that at the very least we could put out an episode to just be like a crash course in, I'm still confused, I'd like to know more, because the minis can continue to be incredible, and that gets a lot of people interested, but I don't feel like they've had a good on-ramp. So hopefully this episode would provide something like that.
Love it. Let's jump to it. I think one of the first things somebody is going to ask is like, maybe they see the box on the shelf, or they say, hey, what is that game you're playing? Like we often are able to answer that question in person. But if you were going to answer that here for somebody, let's talk about what is Underworlds here.
Yeah, so just to briefly cover the corporate side of it. Games Workshop has several IPs and largely calls them Warhammer. Warhammer is their own brand of fantasy or sci-fi, where they add their own trademark or their own signature level of absurd awesomeness into sci-fi, fantasy, whatever IP that they control. They do also have Lord of the Rings, so there is kind of a more familiar level that they haven't inserted their absurd awesomeness into, but they develop a tabletop game for that as well. Everything else, Warhammer falls under two categories: Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40k. Warhammer Underworlds takes place under the Age of Sigmar IP and setting. That is their high fantasy. And Warhammer Underworlds, the setting of that is essentially small skirmish battles in confined spaces like the Underworlds of the different realms, and that can take different forms: cave, caverns, catacombs, gnarl, bramble, like the roots of different vast forests. And basically it's all that. Warhammer Underworlds, that's the setting, and the game is played within that setting. It's gone through several seasons, starting with Shadespire, which was very much a undead catacomb type setting, and we find ourselves now heading into Deathgorge. So just in case you've heard any of those names, usually two words combined into some sort of gruesome or fearful underworld type setting, we are heading into Deathgorge. That is the current season. Previous seasons range from Shadespire, Night Vault, Beastgrave, Dire Chasm, Harrowdeep, Nether Maze, Gnarlwood, and Weird Hollow.
Nailed it.
I was ready to jump in and help you, but you didn't need it. You got it.
Woo! All right, so that's the general setting. The game itself, to represent this on the tabletop and what you and your opponent interact with, is a small-scale skirmish game using boards, a team of minis, and a deck of cards. So right now, those things kind of help narratively build the setting and what is happening between you and your two warbands in the Underworlds. And I think after I've talked about a lot of the technical aspects, let's take a moment here to talk about kind of what really enthralls us in the game and what kind of got its hooks into the game, or what about the game got its hooks into us. Sound good?
Yeah, I think so. Like you're asking like what, why would you even want to start? Like, what is it? Why am I even recommending this game to somebody? Because obviously I've done 115 episodes of a podcast about it. Right. So,
Yeah, what
um,
makes you passionate about it?
yeah. Skylar, you want to take this first?
I don't know. You're the OG, so I kind of
All
thought we'd
right. All
start with
right.
you.
Sure. So for me, it is. I mean, this seems simplistic, but it's. I like that it's got great models. I like that a game can be played quickly. It is not the easiest game to learn. I play a lot of different board games, and quite frankly, there's a lot to like absorb here. But once you've got it, there is so much depth to this game. I've been playing it since it came out, and I've played a lot. I'm not going to say I've played. There's plenty of people who played more than me, but I have played many games of this, and I will come away from games being like, oh, I still have a lot to learn. And man, that is catnip for me. Like a game that has that much depth where you can play again and again and again and feel like you have more to learn and develop and refine is pretty awesome. So that is a big draw for me. And some of that comes from that deck building aspect that you have that lets you keep on kind of thinking about it when you're away from the game. Skylar, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it is this amazing marriage of like card game meets board game. And for most people, I feel like you could just call this a competitive board game, but that doesn't really get across like the deck building that you can do outside of playing. Because most board games, like the game starts when you all sit down at the table together, and that can be true here. We're going to be talking about like the different ways to play Underworlds, and Rivals is one of the ways to play this game, and it is that like true board game experience. But that's not like the ultimate hook for me. The ultimate hook is that I can tailor my deck. So there's a little bit of the warband that I pick that comes into every game, and a little bit of like the play style that I want to lead them through. And so there's a lot of personal expression that's available, like in deck building, as well as then like skill expression when you're actually playing the game. It's not the type of card game where the game is going to play itself based on like your card draw.
Hmm.
You're still going to have to like move models around a table and try to like outthink your opponent. And the positional aspect of that married with this like deck building, like really grabbed me in, especially then with these gorgeous models. Like the first thing that I got to see when I sat down to play Underworlds was Skace Wild Hunt. And those are phenomenal models, some of my favorite to date.
Yeah.
And then Brian had kind of one of the reasons he thought, well, let's put this in front of Skylar, was because there's no measuring. So if you're out there going, I don't want to play a Warhammer game because I don't want to use measuring tape, this is the one game that they have. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the one living game that they have where it's hexagons and no measuring implements. So you actually don't have to worry about eyeing things or measuring things or bumping things. It's right there for you, just like a board game. And
he says that like a plus, but really he's broken.
And the game has just grabbed me ever since I jumped in, and I haven't been able to jump out. I haven't wanted to, simply because of what Davey was saying. Is I walk away from most of the games I play just delighted in what I learned from it and what I took away that I could continue to learn from. Whether a game went poorly or not, it's really rare that I walk away from the table where I didn't have a good time or didn't feel that there wasn't anything in the takeaway column from that game that I could use going forward.
Right. Brian, if you were going to give your why Underworlds pitch.
Well, I might go a little long in this one, but I feel like I got a lot to say. Davey, did you get into the hobby and miniature tabletop gaming at Underworlds and Shadespire?
Oh,
or did
oh
you
no. Oh
know?
no.
How long
Yeah,
have you
no.
been playing Warhammer for?
I was like a 92 or 93. I was a
Okay,
Rogue Trader Warhammer 40K was my
awesome.
on ramp. So
Yeah. So,
do the math on how old I am, listeners. It's old.
well, it's you've been in it longer than I wanted to see if I might have caught you, but no, I started this in 2008, and I approached it purely from a hobby standpoint. I played plenty of video games, but I often got grounded because I was playing too many video games. So the hobby aspect of this has been fantastic for me because from my point of view, like everybody plays the same games, and great games though they may be, video games wise, you don't quite get to put your own personal mark on it like you do with your own miniatures painted and shown across the table. I always prefer the person to person interaction of a board game or a war game, where you and the person across the table are sharing your time together and both trying to have a good experience out of it and sharing memories and a bunch of banter. And having your own minis makes them your own personal team, especially when you put paint on them.
Yeah.
And Warhammer Underworlds really allows you to kind of everybody has the option to play the same warband, but the way you build your deck and the way you paint them really personalizes them. It's like jumping into a same model of fighter craft, but who the pilot is really matters.
Yeah.
And this game proves again and again that the pilot matters most, no matter how strong the warband is or weak. The way Davey can slap you with eyes of 9 versus some guy just getting into the game playing the strongest warband still has to learn how to pilot them, and that matters most. And I think that is one of the biggest things I need to see in a competitive game for me to really sink my teeth into, is that the pilot skill matters most. And this game, I've played Warhammer since 2008. You can play all kinds of Warhammer games, choose your army roster, but this one you get the fixed warband. So it really is about the pilot skill. It kind of reduces what army list choices it is, just takes that out. It's all about the pilot.
Yeah.
And the warbands are so characterful.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, these named characters, in a unit of like 3 to 9 models. So, you don't have to worry about some sort of sprawl or, did I get my list just right? It's like, for better or for worse, this character's with this character. And I can't change that. I picked, this warband.
Yeah.
These two are coming along for the ride.
For better or worse, Turash is in your warband. So
exactly.
And for those army or war game players like myself, you can still convert the minis. So there's nothing saying that you gotta keep them WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. You can still convert them and change them a little bit if you're really into the hobby aspect as well.
yeah.
But otherwise, you're playing a warband that everybody knows. That's that warband. These are the fighters within that warband. How do you pilot them?
What I liked hearing from both of you is the first things you guys both reached for was how you could have your self-expression in there. And Skylar's first thought was, how do I build this deck? How do I show, like, how do I like to play the game deck wise? And Brian's first reach was, I can flex some painting. I can be creative with how I paint or convert, and put that on. And that those are both like moments. You have great community moments with those where somebody says, oh, that's a really, like in Skylar's case, like you might say, that was a very interesting card choice, a really cool interaction I didn't see coming. And you're like, yeah, I worked on that a lot. I really refined that. Or Brian, like you'll put your warband down. You're like, oh man, like your FLM is amazing, gorgeous, or, all whatever the case may be. And it's this kind of spark to like interact with somebody across the table from you, which is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and those interactions where you share that passion really bring the game home for me. But also another key point I think is important about this game is it's also one of the shortest games that GW makes.
Yeah.
So you can get those interactions and you can meet more people. I love Warhammer 40K. I consider it my first love in this hobby. But that takes 3 to 4 hours, often more, to play against one person. This game, you can get a game in as little as 30 minutes, usually goes about an hour. And so you can get multiple games in a night, and that's really valuable as well. And I've met and had stronger relationships because of this game. I think because of that, you get to meet more people and make stronger bonds. And interaction, I think, is what tabletop wargaming is all about.
All right. Well, with that, if that collective verbal love letter didn't do it for you, I don't know what will. But you're dipping your toe in. So, what's the next thing somebody needs to know if they're trying to dip in, trying to see if this is the game for them, or how do I get started?
All right, so I think now we're going to go a bit more to the technical aspects, like what is the game, how is it played. Warhammer typically doesn't involve cards, like a deck of cards, in most of its games. So I've actually heard people say, oh, there's cards in this, I don't want to play a TCG. This is not a TCG or a trading card game. Thinking Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic the Gathering, where you blind open packs of cards to try and build your deck from whatever you get randomly. This is not a TCG. You don't have to randomly buy cards. Every card pack available for purchase, you can know the contents of that card pack before buying. So you don't have to buy packs again and again and again trying to get specific cards or duplicates. They don't allow duplicates in the deck either. So you don't even have to buy the same deck again.
Yeah. That's a good point. And not being a big TCG player, I don't think I always consider that piece. I'd say even more so now as well is the game is very a la carte right now. Like what warband do you want and what do you want to match them with? There's older generations of this game that had the universals, like the deck building aspect was kind of spread out across a lot of purchases. That only really applies to like the very deepest level, the championship level play now, where you might be buying lots of packs just to get a couple things, or not lots of packs, but buying the whole spread of the product to try and make sure you assemble. But there's entry points where it makes you just like, what am I interested in? Those are the pieces I'm going to get.
We'll dive into that more later, but I wanted to get that clear out in front because I have heard the TCG question come up.
Yeah.
The game there is aspects of the game like Davey was talking about with the universal card pool for championship. If you're somebody who used to play or learned a little bit about the game earlier, things have changed and they've made it, like he said, very a la carte, easy to enter. That's why we want to get this out, because Deathgorge is on the way, and Deathgorge is another entry point for new players. I think that makes it really easy for an easy on ramp.
What were you going to say, Skylar?
Oh, I was going to say, even then, the warbands don't come packaged with cards anymore.
Yeah.
So if you're familiar with how the game used to have a universal card delivery system as kind of like a product model, they used to come. It was like you got a warband, you got the universal. So if you wanted the warband and you didn't care about the cards, you were getting the cards anyways. If you wanted the cards and you didn't want the warband, you were buying that and maybe parting out the warband, or all of a sudden you had another one in your collection, right? Whereas with that a la carte, as highlighted, you can say, oh, hey, I'm not interested in that particular warband. So that is a purchase you do not have to make unless you're a total completionist who needs to collect this game.
Ill is what the word is.
hey now. But yeah, I just wanted to call that out, that the game absolutely used to pair these two ideas, the deck building and the war bands. So you were buying everything if you wanted to stay competitive. And there's different formats in the game now that lighten that load as well. And they've separated the products to also lighten that load. So there's never been a better time to get into this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Another quick note is, if you already play Age of Sigmar, all of these warbands are miniatures that can be played in Age of Sigmar. Some people use them just as replacements or proxies to make a more characterful character within their army, replacing sergeants, etc. But otherwise, Games Workshop themselves puts out rules so that you can play with the warbands from Warhammer Underworlds in Age of Sigmar. You can include them into your army, and they have their own data cards or battle scroll with the army rules on them, so you can play with these figures in 2 different game modes.
Love it.
Yeah, before we move on, I kind of want to just break down, what does a game of Underworlds look like? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Um, so you have two decks when you sit down to play Underworlds. One 12-card deck. This is your objectives. This is what you're looking to score. So you actually get to tailor your route to scoring in this game. For we were talking about, trading card games. Very often they talk about win conditions in those games, and you're kind of hunting your win condition down, or trying to manifest it on the table, right? You get to actually plot out your own scoring path in this game, and it gets its own deck.
I think that's a really cool thing to point out. One of my favorite board games is Root, which is this asymmetric game, like a sort of, I don't know, pinnacle in that design. I think it's a brilliantly designed asymmetric game. This is also asymmetric, but like you said, you get to choose, so in that it's kind of predetermined. You get to decide, this is how I'm going to score. This is my route to victory. This is how I'm going to do it, and that's really cool aspect of it.
Agree. Root's a great game, by the way. Endorse that. So you of your two decks, we have the one that's scoring, and then the other one is a 20-card deck that is your tools for the course of the game. So you get to pick not only how you're going to score, but how you're going to support that scoring. And you'll notice the deck counts are kind of low, 12 in scoring, 20 in tools. And those are minimums. You can go higher than that, but it's a card game, so you want to maintain a low level if you want reliability. But one of the things that allows these to be so low, Brian touched on this earlier, is you only bring singles of any card. You're not allowed to bring duplicates. So you don't have to worry about repurchasing anything to make sure you have multiple copies. You don't have to worry about, are my ratios quite right? Do I have 3 of this card? Because I really need it, and then I've got one of this other card because I only need it in niche scenarios. That's not here. And when you sit down to play a game, you're going to see 15 of your tools, unless you do drawing or some abilities allow you to see it. So you're not going to see all of your 20 cards in most of the games that you sit down to play, which is one of those reasons why you want to keep that deck count lower. Is to make sure that what you're seeing is the cards that you want to see. And between you is a board, 2 boards actually. You both bring a board in this game, and that's one of those moments where this game starts having layers to it as soon as you sit down to play, because there's kind of a mini game, and each board has different launch points that are predetermined. You're not going to be picking your own launch points. You're going to be picking from the launch points that are built into the board. And so you'll be like, oh, okay, I need to hang back this game. You're going to grab a board that has further back, launch points. They're called starting hexes in this game. And you two are going to, you're going to put down a board and your opponent's going to put down a board, and they're going to get paired up together to create a battlefield. And that's often going to feel just slightly different every game as to what types of kind of terrain, but hexes, hex types were on your boards. And then you're going to deploy your warband that you've possibly lovingly painted or converted. I am one of those people who bring gray plastic. Well, thankfully, it's colored plastic.
Yeah, if I may interject, when you sit across from your opponent, the narrative is you and your warband is encountering the other warband. So the 2 boards that you guys match up, and the way you set up those boards is kind of the confines of the catacombs or the underworlds or the tunnels that you two find yourselves in, and you're duking it out in the hallway. So there's ways to set those boards up. I think most importantly for new listeners or people not familiar, that means that it is not on a giant 6x4 table or even less. Instead, and you don't need your own terrain. You get these boards in the core boxes, in the starter sets, etc. And you don't need any terrain. You don't need to build and paint your own terrain. You don't need to go look for any 3D printed or anything like that. You don't need to go off the reservation. It's all within the game and in the starter boxes.
Yeah, the starter boxes are fantastic for this game. They've They give you everything you need for people to like get going. Gives you 2 boards, gives you dice, 2 warbands. They even give you 2 what they call universal rivals decks, which is these decks that sit aside from the warbands. Universal in this game means like you can plug it in to a warband, and so the boxes that you're buying now come with your 2 warbands and these 2 universal decks, and you're like, oh, what can I do with these? Well, you can start deck building from them. You can hand one to the person across the table, take one yourself, and all of a sudden you have 64 cards that you can reduce down to, that minimum of 32 cards, and you can see how that worked. And like that's such a light deck building commitment too. And there's a whole format built around that. It's called the Nemesis format.
Yeah, I think we'll cover the formats a little later.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, there's essentially 3 format levels for everybody to play at. But when you get a warband, it comes with its own faction deck. That faction deck is considered a rivals deck. That is the basic entry for deck building. And deck building, I mean none whatsoever. It's just simply those 32 cards that the faction comes with. You could swap it with other rivals decks, but only the faction deck or a universal rivals deck.
Exactly.
And that's straight out the box. Out of the box, they give you a faction deck for that warband, as well as the other warband in the starter box with it, and 2 universal decks.
Where they like to advertise or promote that way of playing. They have a shuffle and play like logo that they'll print to promote how easy it is to play Rivals, that there's no deck building, that you can just sit down and start playing a game of Underworlds. When you sit down to play a game of Underworlds 2 for the first time, we talked about how games kind of range between 30 minutes to an hour. The first time you sit down to play, it's probably going to take much more than an hour, and that's okay. I would say do not be discouraged by that. It only takes a few games to get the hang of it, and all of a sudden that's muscle memory. And so the more you engage with it, the more that you realize like there's this structure that you're operating within, and that structure kind of allows the game to reduce down, because you're learning so much less every time you sit down to play. 30 to an hour is super reasonable for a game. I would say just, if you're in a pinch, and you're like, oh, I really want to play a game of Underworlds, like 30 is really on the low end. So like, unless that game happens to be a blowout, which can happen, like you probably don't have time for that game. Like plan for an hour and then, see how long it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you're learning about all the options you have before you, the game, I think, is epitomized or is a really great example of easy to learn, hard to master. I think the skill ceiling for this game goes really high. But once you learn, there's a ton of options available to you. But I'll be honest with you, dumb it down to a lot of times you're moving or you're attacking or you're doing a combination of that. You have a lot of other options, and that's where knowing exactly what to do at the right moment, that's where the skill ceiling like really goes up. So when you're first learning, you learn a lot of options that you have available to you, but they also provide a playthrough book now. That is a recent addition that they've been including into the boxes so that you can walk through an experience and kind of see a whole range of what the game has to offer.
I imagine they are not going to be including those in the core boxes. I'd be delighted if I'm wrong, but you can for sure count on seeing those in what they call out as a starter set. And a starter set is, I guess, different in the sense that it doesn't come with, so like a core box, we mentioned, will come with 4 decks because it's 2 warbands, a deck for each, and then 2 universal rivals decks that'll come in those boxes as well. The starter set does not come with those extra 2 decks. It just comes with your warbands and the warband decks. Still a great place to start because it does come with that play guide.
Yeah, and I think an important thing to mention is that when we're talking about what comes in what things, like those core boxes and the starter sets each come with boards and dice, right?
Yeah.
But a standalone warband doesn't, in it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll break down the individual packaging later.
Sure.
But the starter box from a core box, I think, is a good delineation. The starter boxes can typically be found in your general stores, your Walmarts, your Barnes and Noble, your kind of like on the shelf casual. Like they'll be found in the board game section of a regular store. If you go to a dedicated gaming store, that's where you'll probably find the core boxes, or if you go online, you'll find the core boxes. And by that, we mean this is the seasonal introduction to the game. You get 2 warbands, their faction decks, and 2 universal decks, as well as the current rule book, which will have some of the unique aspects of the realm or the catacombs that we find ourselves in this season that kind of flavors the game for a season. And the season we'll get into later, exactly detailing kind of the roadmap that we are seeing.
So Brian, Skylar was kind of laying out what a game looks like. We kind of we got excited and jumped off on some other things. But if you were to say, like, if somebody had no idea what a game of Underworlds looked like, if they were to watch it start to finish, how would you say that game plays out?
Yeah, just kind of broad strokes. This is an alternating activation type game. Over the course of the game, you will play 3 rounds, you and your opponent. Within each round, you each take 4 activations alternating. So I would do an activation with a fighter, and then after that, my opponent would then do their activation with a fighter, and back and forth. 4 activations each within a round, and 3 rounds total in a game. At the end of that, whoever scored the most glory wins. And you can play best of 1, you can play best of 3. That's typically how a game goes.
Yeah. And the only thing I'd add in there is that in between each activation is when you get that opportunity to play your cards that you brought. Those 20 tools that I was talking about that you're bringing with you, they call them power cards in this game. And that's some of the fun of the tempo, is like you're activating a model, a fighter on your side, and then you and your opponent both get a chance to play cards, and you both do before moving on to the next turn, which will be your opponent's turn. And then you both, after that turn, will get chances to play cards again. So you're always getting to play cards into your opponent's turn as well as into your own turn. But you only draw 5 cards at the beginning of a round, and you don't refill naturally during the course of a round. So, with you alternating, there's 8 activations in a round. You only have 5 cards. Where are you going to sew them in? And that's just kind of a fun aspect of the game that I think is worth calling out, is how that card aspect flows in.
Yeah, so you do get that satisfying, you've triggered my trap card moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, with playing the game, they provide us 3 different formats, 3 levels of complexity to play the game at. The game is still played the same. You use the same rules in each of the 3 formats. All that gets more complex is how complex your decks can be. So we've already spoken about Rivals. Rivals would just simply be a pre-made deck as sold to you, either your faction deck that comes with the warband, 32 cards that is made for that warband, and or universal cards that are sold in different packs. You can just swap the entire deck for another deck, and that is a Rivals deck, and you and your opponent play up. You can play any of the 3 formats against each other, but if you're playing Rivals into a, say, championship format, might be an uphill battle, but that's because championship has a lot more options.
Yeah, I would say with any of your living games out there, it's better to start out on an even footing, especially if you're both at the same skill level, right? And so that even footing is what format you're playing. Oh, I'm playing Rivals. I didn't do any deck building. Oh, I'm playing Championship. I spent 3 hours building this deck. It's like, and I tuned out all the cards I didn't like. Yeah. Well, I think your deck is going to flow a little bit better than mine. Yeah. But so, when you're sitting down, just make sure that you're both coming in at the level that you're both expecting, even if you're looking for that uphill battle.
Yeah. And that's not to say that Rivals decks are bad. Rivals decks are generally a wide range toolbox for you to build off of. So they might have conflicting, like, build divergences. Or another way to say that, they might have different branches where it's like you could take this warband and run it towards more of a hold objective build, or you can go more an aggro build. But when you're playing with a Rivals deck, you have both of those. They might not synergize totally well, but those are giving you tools to take it further if you want to build down a specific path, or if you want to better bring those two branches together so that they synergize better. That's how you, with the deck building, you can make that synergy happen either in Nemesis or even further in Championship. I hope that makes sense.
And with Rivals, so Brian mentioned that you can take a universal Rivals deck and plug it in. So what that looks like is you buy the warband that you've been waiting, or you've been excited to buy. Let's say that's Skavek's Plague Pack. And you decide that you want to try out this other deck that's available. So let's say that's Void-Cursed Thralls. And what you can do is you literally remove the 32 cards that come with Skavek's Plague Pack, but not their fighter cards. Those are extra. Those are beyond the 32 cards that are built for them. Their fighter cards you always have to have. So you grab those, you grab their models, and then you grab the Void-Cursed Thralls deck, which is 32 cards. And there you go. You're now playing Rivals. Still, you're just playing with the Skavek's Plague Pack fighters and the Void-Cursed Thralls deck. Whereas normally, you'd probably be playing the Skavek's Plague Pack fighters and Skavek's Plague Pack deck. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where like your variety kind of comes in Rivals.
But Skylar, what if I want both?
If you want both, excellent. So that is the most popular format of the game. That is called Nemesis. As touched on earlier, Nemesis allows you to take one warband deck, always one warband deck, and one 32 card Universal's Rivals deck. And then you can take that card pool, usually around 64 cards, and cut that down as far as you want to make sure that you're still within your deck building minimum of 32 cards. And there's a couple other deck building limitations there, but I won't get too into the weeds. There's in this game you have to match, like in your tools, like you can't have more gambits than upgrades, which for my Magic the Gathering players out there, gambits are going to be your sorceries and instants, and upgrades are going to be your equipments. Since there's no resource costs in this game for your gambits, they don't want to have a whole deck on your side full of gambits. They want you to have some cards that cost you a resource. So that that is getting into the weeds a little bit, but that's what your power deck can do for you. Is you've got these cards in there that can be played without the cost of something, and these cards in there that can be attached to somebody, a fighter, upgrading them to make them a better fighter going forward, to give them an equipment, to give them a weapon.
Yeah, that's a permanent change instead of a one-time use. That can be huge, even more. That can be bigger than a ploy or a gambit in this game.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess it's worth saying, we didn't mention it earlier, but that resource you're talking about, it's called glory, but your glory is your victory points, but it's also your resource. So
yeah, it's not like mana. You're not trying to throw out lands in order to fuel your engine. Instead, you just need to get glory on the board. You need to do something successfully.
And that construct, it means that the game inherently has a potential snowball effect where, like, as you gain victory points, you gain a resource, and as you gain that resource, you gain the capability of getting more victory points. So finding a way to get that engine going is a really crucial aspect of this game.
Agree. And there are a couple ways to get glory in this game. This kind of circles back to, what does playing a game look like? Either A, it's through the 12 cards that you designed. That's going to be your scoring path. And by design, I just mean the cards that you brought with you. Even if this was Rivals, there's 12 cards waiting for you there that are going to help you score. And some of them are called surges. Those will score instantly. So you're trying to do this thing in the like current board state, and you're trying to affect it in such a way that where you meet this condition on the card in front of you. You're like, can I make this thing happen? Can I stand in this spot? Can I push somebody into another spot? Can I kill somebody? If I can do that, this card will go off for me and I'll get glory. So the game rewards you for interacting with it, and then that reward can assist you further into the game. So
snowball speed boost.
Indeed. And if you're ever like, I can't score any of these cards, don't worry, just kill one of their fighters. That's the other way in this game to get glory. So it's pretty limited to the cards that you brought are going to define how you're going to get glory. But every model, the enemy fighter or the enemy opponent, when you get into this game, you'll see the words enemy fighter quite a bit, enemy warband. That's who you're trying to take down. That's Brian sitting across the table from me. Hello, Brian.
What?
I'm taking your fighters down.
No.
But okay, so to circle back to Nemesis, yes, there's some deck building restrictions as to like how to tailor your deck, because there's safety rails built in. They don't want you to have those things that I said that can get you instant glory if you score them. You're only allowed 6 of them in your deck, period. And that so if you're building a objective deck is what they call this, your scoring path, then you want to keep that as low to 12 as possible, because you're only ever going to get 6 surges, and you want to see those. So if you continue to flood your deck with not surges that will get you instant glory, then you're probably not going to see them. So you'll kind of deck build down to 12 there. And same is true on the other side, where it's like you can bring as many or fewer cards that are one-time play at no cost as you bring cards that cost you something, those upgrades. So there's a little bit of balance in the deck building. So just look those up. They're out there on the Warhammer community website. They've done a great job of sectioning off game. Sectioning off isn't the right word I'm looking for here. But personally, as somebody who came into this game at one point, it was hard to find what we're talking about. Like, it used to be difficult to hunt down the deck building rules for a format. And it's no longer the case because they've just done such a great job of, if I go to the Warhammer community website and I go to downloads, I can click on Underworlds and I'll get all of it. I don't have to like find the right button that brings me to a specific couple of documents for Underworlds. They're all in one place. So the Nemesis deck building rules are there. Any rules that pertain to Rivals, also there. But Nemesis is just this wildly awesome format that I think if I had to highlight one thing about it that it does really, really well is because you just need one Warband and one Universal Rivals deck, you become like competitive off of just that. And once you've decided for yourself, this is what my deck looks like I've sat down and I've spent some time taking these 64 cards and reducing them down to the deck that I want. Once that's solved for you, once you're happy with that deck and you're like, I don't want to make any more adjustments, you can just have that. And that will continue to be good for you for a long time.
So that kind of sums up like Nemesis. And I think one thing that we've seen particularly with that is like how much more approachable, like how this tiered thing with Rivals and then Nemesis and then Championship is. But we talk about that tier and then we go to Championship. And then what is Championship? So, Brian,
Davey, I just want to have all the good stuff.
Yeah, that's Championship. Championship is the most detailed and most involved level of the deck building. You have the widest card pool. You have to know like a certain things you can only have. They have a restricted list, which is you can only have 3 things off the restricted list. and there's a lot more rules to it, and but there's a lot more breadth there, and so there, Skylar talked early on about the expressing your individuality, or sort of the individual expression of deck building, and this is where it shows at its most. There is a lot of deck building with Nemesis, and we talked about that some, but Championship is really where that takes off. Nemesis is a relatively young format compared to Championship, which was the default way of playing for a long time, and they realized that it was kind of prohibitive to new folks like perhaps yourself, listener. Having said that, with those formats, I think another question people often have is, hey, I'm jumping into this game. If I'm picking up these cards, are they good forever? Or are they not? Like, there is some rotation, just like with anything, Skylar, you're more familiar with Magic than I am. So maybe you can draw a parallel that I'm not able to reach for.
It's been a minute since I've been in tune with
All right. So one of the ways that the game has its own hygiene system is it will rotate out cards after they've been in circulation for 2 years. After 2 years, they've made changes, iterations. They've standardized the language so that everything's coherent. And in order to get rid of old cards that don't fit with that new standardization, or the if the new build, or they realize something was too strong, like, it only sticks around for 2 years. So that way those things rotate out, they go into your deck box. Those are still accessible through something called Relic, which is a very niche type game mode, but it is still accessible. You don't actually tear the cards up and throw them away. You can still use them for other things. But for competitive play, they do rotate cards out every 2 years after they've been in cycle.
That basically means that I think what's important to know is, like, if you pick up a warband, the warband in that card, that set of cards are good. As far as we know, they're good forever, right? Like, we've never seen a warband rotate.
Right. The faction decks do not apply here. The faction decks, if you're playing a Shadespire Warband Season 1 back in 2017, if you still have your Steelheart's Champions faction deck, those are still viable, still legal right now.
A Steelheart represent?
Yep. Those faction decks will always be evergreen. They will stay. They may have made erratas or changes to some of the cards, but that's all covered in their documents for free download PDFs, just because sometimes they add new words or new keywords to things as the game progresses. But you always, if there's an old warband that you bought years ago and you're looking at bringing them back because they love them, they're still viable. They're still good. So something we've also seen recently, previously, seasons would be a whole year. And while that was cool for continuity, one thing that kind of was a tough pill to swallow is when Beastgrave came out, Shadespire got rotated out, or, when Direchasm came out, Night Vault rotated out. And throwing an entire year's worth of cards that you had collected into your long-term storage bin was kind of a tough pill to swallow. Also, the card pool for the season kind of drastically went down while the new season started building out the roster again. So as a change to that, currently we live in a system where it's a 6-month season. Death Gorge coming out sometime, typically in October, is where we see most of these seasons release. Will be the latest season, and that'll run for 6 months until spring, summer of next year, 2024.
Yeah. So the first 4 years of this game, a season looked like a core box with 2 warbands and then 6 standalone warbands, and universals spread out across all those warband things. We have transitioned to our current situation, which appears to be a season is, like you said, 6 months, which is a core box. That's 2 warbands and 2 Universal Rivals decks, and then 2 standalone warbands and 2 standalone Rivals decks.
Yeah, so buying a core box in this case Death Gorge, you basically have half of the season already purchased. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It also gives you within that box like tons of iterations to play. And then from then on, you can kind of pick and choose a la carte what you want out of the rest of the season. If you feel like you need it for competitive play, or you just got to have it.
With new boxes, starting seasons every 6 months, it creates these awesome on-ramps for players because, you know, if somebody's joining the game, you don't have to point back at a box that released almost a year ago and say, like, if you pick that up now, then, you know, it's only going to be good for like another year. You know, you're not going to, it used to be this weird thing where it was like, so like, let's say, for example, I was coming back I was playing Beastgrave Dire Chasm time period. How this used to look is like, let's say somebody came to my local scene, you know, during Dire Chasm, and they really wanted to pick up Beastgrave. People would discourage them from picking up Beastgrave because, and for good reason, they'd say like, hey, if you pick up that box, we're almost done with Dire Chasm, which means Beastgrave will have been out for 2 years. That box is going to go away. But they only had those 2 boxes to pick from as kind of like their on-ramps. Whereas like now with on-ramps every 6 months, like they just last each individually what feels like so much longer, because I can just say like, oh, hey, you know, Death Gorge just came out. So like that's going to be good for 2 years. But like if you go one back to Weird Hollow and you want to pick that up, that'll be good for a year and a half yet. You know, so like it's nice to have the increments, I guess is what I'm trying to say, instead of where you had these like solid years that would just fall out all together all at once, where it was like anything that you bought for like the Beastgrave season in the example I gave, when Harrow Deep comes out, like that won't be usable anymore, except for the warbands and their in-faction decks. So I really like that less falls out all at once. And so when you're telling somebody, you know, like, here's the product, it's easier to say, like, here's the ones that are going to be sticking around for a while. And even that one far at the back, like, don't worry, like, there's only 6 months there instead of like a full year there that you're missing out on in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we say this as a warning just in case somebody is getting in and they try and buy a bunch of stuff, but they don't know exactly what. We'll be covering those buying guides here shortly, but it is kind of a necessary aspect for the hygiene of the game to rotate those old cards out, because there's some stuff that comes out that's just not fit for purpose, and the game evolves and it has been getting better and better, and part of that is having to cycle out some of the old concepts that no longer fit with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like with anything, like there's certain things, as long as a particular card exists, you have to watch out for interactions with that card. And so in order to permit design room to be available, you have to clear out some of the space. But we've been talking a lot about purchases lately. Like if somebody's saying like, hey, I think I want to get in, how do I do it? Like what's my out of pocket for it? Like what's the answer to that question?
Yeah, so I've taken a look at the Games Workshop's recent prices. These are all going to be in US dollars. If you know the conversion rate, or you can look it up, Google Box, just get the conversion rate between your local currency and US dollars.
Yeah. And I think like what you can take away is like the relative price points here. So,
yeah. So, one of the things I just wanted to get out here, like I'm a Warhammer player and I believe that Skylar said so as well. This is the cheapest competitive game to get into. So right away, we're going to break down some of those costs and we can show you just how cheap it can be. But even if you buy everything to stay competitive or just be a completionist, this is the cheapest competitive game to get into, where you can go to some big events, some big conventions, and play at a competitive level with some other great people around the world. And it is fantastic. And I think it's a great price point. So
Games Workshop, if you're listening, this is an advantage that your game has really. Not room to price hike.
Fair warning, GW does price hike incrementally. Like we've seen some of the prices increase a couple dollars here and there. So like right now, some of the prices that I'll describe, you might see if you're listening to this a year or two later. Some of these might have crept up a little bit, but generally these Underworlds releases only creep up a few dollars each time when Games Workshop does a general price hike on most of their products, which they are known to do. It's just part of every business and inflation, and whether GW does it too frequently, leave that for some other channels. Anyway, so what is this game going to cost me? So a core box, which is what I'll refer to it as, the season, so what we can expect Death Gorge to cost, it will be about $95 US. The starter set, which is we've explained is kind of the Barnes & Noble starting entry game. This is lacking the 2 Universal Rivals decks, but it's got 2 warbands, all the dice, all the tokens, the boards, everything you need to play. It's only 2 warbands and their faction decks. The starter set will cost you $60 US. So for the remainder of the season, within a season, you have the core box. You'll have 2 faction warbands released separately, and then 2 separate Universal Rivals decks. Each separate warband release is going to cost $42 US, and each Universal Rivals deck released separately will cost $29 currently. So in a total season, you will see a core box, 2 warbands, 2 Universal Rivals decks for a total of $237 US for a 6-month season. So that is if you are a completionist and you want to collect every release for the game going forward. If you get in Death Gorge and you're like, what is it going to cost for an investment to complete Death Gorge? $237 total. It's cheaper than a lot of Kickstarters out there.
Mm.
Calling out Skylar here.
Got him.
Got him.
So if I was to boil this down, because like the way people are going to think about this is like I'll put out these scenarios. So like say you are somebody who is interested in this game, but you're just going to play it at home. You have a relative or a friend, the 2 you're just going to play this game, try it out. What's your entry point here?
Yeah, so I would say if you and a friend just want to try the game out, starter set will do. That's $60.
Okay.
And that'll get you and your friend all the tokens, all the boards you need to play, and 2 factions.
All right. And
if I think a better price point would be the core box at $95, split between 2 people. That's like $47 each. That gets you 2 factions again, but also 2 rivals decks. This will allow you a lot more variance of play between you and your friend. And I think it's a much better price point.
That's the game and then room to kind of expand the level at which you play. Skylar, what were you going to say?
Oh, exactly what he said. He nailed it.
Yeah. Let's say that you're part of a community. You already know that there's some locals who play. You're looking to just like dip in, but you don't really need the boards and dice because those can be provided for you. Like, how do you jump on at that point?
So if you see a warband that's currently available from GW that you're just like, that's the warband, that's mine, that's what I want to rep, that's a team, the banner I want to bear, $42. If you can get that warband and bring it to your local community, if you got a community like ours nearby that has boards and people are eager to get new people in, we have a plethora of boards and tokens that we can offer and help somebody fill that gap. $42. You bring your faction, you bring the rivals deck that comes with them. Show up, you're playing the game.
Yeah. One of the things that we talked about earlier was this sort of a la carte system, and it is more present than it ever was before. It is important to know that there are certain warbands and decks that are only present in a core box. So if you want to, like if the universal deck or the warband you want is in that core box, the only way you can get at it is through that core set, which, as you mentioned, is like pretty great value for, if those were all priced individually, then it works out pretty well. But it's just something
it's
to be
also
aware of. Yeah.
yeah, it's also where the rule book is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So how you jump on depends on like what your community looks like.
I also want to make a quick call out. The rule book is nothing intimidating. It's softback, little paper pamphlet. It is not a hardcover rule book tome that you can whack somebody with. And a lot of that is just kind of explaining a bunch of options and scenarios in there. So it's a very easy to digest rule book.
Yeah, and it's also available online. So if you happen to
Yeah.
be somebody who's like just going to do that single warband thing, all I want to do, like, I think these plague rats look awesome. I'm going to pick them up and I'm going to see what I can do with them. But I want to make sure I can figure out the rules. Well, those are available to you without having to get into the core set or the starter set.
Totally free.
It is
on warhammerunderworlds.com.
Yeah.
It is also much harder to digitally whack somebody with a rule book.
So that's how you jump in.
Yeah, I do want to point out though, if you've already got a warband, so you say you've got an older warband that you just live or die, they haven't come out with a new iteration that has captured you quite as much, because they do kind of reiterate on different factions. So you might see a new thing that just really really encapsulates another characterful aspect of a faction. But if you got your warband already picked out and you're just like, I just need cards to fuel what I'm going to do as the pilot of this warband. So what does the price point look like if you want to stay in the game, be competitive, and you just need the cards? The total cost for that would be the core box and the 2 Universal Rivals decks that are sold a la carte, bringing the total upkeep per season, 6-month season, at $153.
And that's for somebody who's like, I play Chosen Axes and only Chosen Axes. What up, Wathlab? Or I'm a Blade Coven Stan Lethenham.
Yep.
You can endlessly like figure out other ways, like that'll get you your boards, your tokens, your decks, your options for continuing to like kind of mess with that particular warband that you find to be your favorite.
For
Once you
$100,
yeah,
Go ahead.
for $150 every 6 months, you can be like, there is no higher amount of money that you need to spend to be competitive, right? Like that's getting you all the cards for championship. That's getting you all of the different because they come out in their own universal decks. Which is something that I think we kind of glossed over, is that like all of the universal cards that you're using these days are housed always in these Universal Rivals decks now, which is awesome. So like as you're buying these, you're giving yourself options for both the Nemesis format as well as the Championship format.
Yeah, and if you even want to be more scrupulous, you could even look at the decks online and decide whether or not you actually need that deck in particular. Are you only going to need one card out of it? Like, maybe it's not worth it to you. So you could reduce that cost further. Maybe it's the a la carte decks that you don't necessarily need, especially if you're just playing Nemesis. But you can really bring this price point down even further if you need to.
Realize that there's a universal deck that just sort of incompatible with your warband.
Yeah.
I think a worthy caveat here, while we're just kind of wrapping up this sort of pricing thing, is that there's certain warbands that were released. They were clearly like a Warhammer Underworlds warband, but then they wanted to make those models available for Age of Sigmar. It is possible to end up with just the models from something. And so if you're about to make a purchase, just make sure that if it's a warband you want to play in this game, that it also includes the cards, or you have a way to find those cards elsewhere.
Yeah, you might look on eBay for a warband. If you look on the Games Workshop site, it generally, when a season rotates out, the Games Workshop's no longer producing the cards for that either. They will still always produce the models, because those models have rules in Age of Sigmar. And so the models will still be available individually from Games Workshop at times. So if you're looking online for an old warband that you are a diehard for, just make sure that the seller is including the cards in that sale. You might be paying, out of production costs. So also make sure that it is a warband that you're committed to, that you're willing to pay that price for. It's something that, unfortunately, the game has 50 some warbands at this point, and Games Workshop keeps the 2 current years in production. And sometimes they repackage those things, like the Rivals of Nethermaze is the 2 warbands from Nethermaze, just for their faction decks and the models, but not the universal decks that were with them. So just be cognizant of that. I personally would recommend anybody getting into the game right now, start at Death Gorge and buy on from there. Don't try and go backwards unless it's a warband that you really have a love for right now that's currently available from Games Workshop. Just be cautious of eBay.
Duly noted. So I think that is starting to wrap us up. What other things do you want to hit before we kind of close things out here?
Something that might happen is maybe you are the only person to be playing in the area. We hope that this might be a resource for you to help get people in. Share that link around and pitch that. Let us help you pitch the game to people and get your community started locally. But for some people, they might be too remote. Might just not be an option. So what are the options for somebody if they don't have a community around them, or they're just too remote? They don't have the ability to play this game physically in person. Scott, what are our options there?
Sure. There are 2 ways that I'm aware of today that you can play this game online. There is a Steam game, I'm not sure if the purchase is limited to the Steam storefront. It's just if you're a PC gamer out there, you're probably familiar with the Steam storefront, and there is a official Underworlds video game. However, it does not stay current. So if you're looking to stay current with the game, this is a bad route, as it is generally like rule sets and releases behind the main game. In fact, that has kept me from spending a lot of time in it, so I couldn't even tell you right now if they're continuing releases for that game. Do either of you know?
There are. I think they've actually made it even more approachable. Like they used to release warbands, and where you'd have to buy each warband individually, which if you're buying the physical copies and they're asking you to buy the digital ones, I wasn't able to keep up with. But I believe they've changed that. There's either sales or bundle deals where you can get the whole game and warbands included. It's not necessarily that it's behind on the warband releases. They totally have gone in their own order of warband releases. They've got years now of seeing how Underworlds has developed. They're not necessarily going to follow in the same tread and make all the same mistakes and repeat those things. They don't want to just be reliving where the game has been before. They're doing their own kind of timeline. So it's almost an alternate universe meta online there, which for Skylar has not been appealing. I'd say that if this is your best route to get into the game, it's totally it's not going to make any difference to you what this meta is compared to what the physical world is playing in the meta right now. I think it is a great game to play because it does a lot of the work for you in the match. A lot of the dice results are snappier and the interaction snappier, controlled by the computer, kind of a thing. And it's all visual, really good visuals as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to use that to hone your skills and even just kind of your understanding of the game flow and what's available to you from actions and stuff like that, it's a good place to learn the basics, if nothing else. And available as well online. This is so with most games out there. Very often there's, especially when there's a dedicated fan community, there are non-official versions that are available. Legality pending. But there are so many games that I've seen come and go where fans just insist on seeing them, online. And Underworlds is no different. So there was a tabletop simulator version of the game, still is technically. It just hasn't received updates in a minute. And my understanding is that the torch may be being passed from the original fans that dedicated time and effort to get that going to someone new to keep the tabletop simulator mod a place to play Underworlds online. Again, fan run, not official. Same with a version of it's called Vassal. And the reason I was kind of stumbling there is I was trying to decide if that's like a game system. It's like a game. It's where there is a mod for Underworlds. So like, from like a technical standpoint, it's like if I was firing up Tabletop Simulator, I'd then, download Underworlds and I'd play it on Tabletop Simulator. Same is true of Vassal. You download that, then you download the Underworlds mod and get it going there. There we are. And that is run by a very dedicated community as well with their own Discord, the Vassal Discord. So both are great places to play the game. I'd say Vassal, currently has the advantage of being up to date.
And for reference, the Steam game for Warhammer Underworlds Online is $30 for everything. And they've gone up to Drippers, Wraith Creepers, and Storm of Celestis.
Oh,
excellent.
I didn't realize they were that far along. That's cool.
Yeah. I think this DLC has kind of slowed down, but I don't know. But yeah, Vassal is up to date. It is a lot less visual. It is much more of a digital board game rather than a video game. But otherwise has been a great resource, especially in times of strife like the pandemic. So we've all tried our hand at it at one time or another. So those are your options if you can't get a local community going, or you just need something in between your weekly league. If you manage to get a weekly league going, we also have an episode for how to run your own league. If you're trying to get some people to butts and seats come week by week, check out our episode on how to start your own league, and you can look at our backlog. We have lots of resources. Check us out. And we also have blog posts detailing new releases, which you can see upcoming ones for stuff like Death Gorge.
Or if you want to read back as far as Hexbane Hunters.
Yeah.
We started
Shameless plug.
Well, so one of the things that we kind of glossed over that I want to jump back into is we were kind of talking about like pricing and seasons and formats. I made mention that when you're playing Nemesis in particular, this is a gem that I think Nemesis has in its crown, is that a deck can last a very long time. There was a deck that was released. So like I'm talking a Universal Rivals deck that became available for purchase like 10 months ago called Fearsome Fortress. And not only do I continue to build decks just out of that, and could. So like that was $30 I spent 10 months ago, and that is super relevant still. Like I can still deck build with that today, and I'll be able to deck build that for a year and a couple months yet. So those purchases like really go a long way. And I had mentioned like, if you sit down and you deck build and you're like, okay, here's my Fearsome Fortress deck. For me, I have one built with Mad Mob, right? Mm-hmm. And that deck is there and continues to be there, and like I can go back, grab that off the shelf, toss those cards together with the deck list that I had made however many months ago, bring that to my local and compete, and that be relevant, that be legal. Like that's like a totally like casual easy way to interact with the game while still getting like you got that deck building checked off at one point in time, and like it feels so good like to be able to just like have it done. It's almost like your painted minis. It's like once you get your minis painted, then like those are always there and they're always painted. You can always bring those out. Like once you build a Nemesis deck, there's no reason that like you can't sit on that. Like you can take those cards apart, sure, but like keep the list, and then later be like, oh, I want to revisit that deck. Oh, I don't have to redo the work. I did it once. I have this deck built. I'm gonna go grab that again, bring it and play it because it's still legal for like 2 years.
Yeah, like for instance, me and my wife, she joins us when I go to the league nights, and I let her, like, she's got her warband, her deck. She has a Nemesis deck built, and I don't have to try and scrabble cards together or make proxy cards for championship because she's just rocking a Nemesis deck and I'm using a different Nemesis deck. So it's been really helpful for sharing a card pool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Less internal competition there.
Yeah. And since we've moved away from the formats topically here, I just kind of wanted to drive them home for you as we're kind of closing out of our main topic here. Is I just wanted to recap with a few words, what these 3 different ways to play this game are. Because we talked about them in varying degrees and ran down varying rabbit holes, and then kind of talked about, what buying product for each of them looks like and how they live within, these 2 years of six-month seasons. But to kind of summarize it for you, there are 3 play formats for Underworlds, and they're kind of the pillars of Underworlds. There's Rivals, which is no deck building, just shuffle and play. There's Nemesis, which is deck building from 2 sources. It's your Warband's Rivals deck, which is the cards unique to them, and 1 Universal Rivals deck. That's it. And then there's Championship. And this is deck building from a product pool comprised of the last 4 seasons of Underworlds. And this format also includes what they call a Forsaken and Restricted list, which if there are powerful cards in the game, this helps limit how many of them you're allowed to bring into a deck. And so that's kind of your play formats. And I think one of the coolest things about them is that they ramp into each other very naturally. Like when you get somebody into this game and they're playing Rivals, if they want more Underworlds, if they want to deck build, like there's this very natural thing that we've all witnessed where somebody's like, oh, I don't like these cards in my deck and I really wish I could take them out, or like this interest to like personalize it and make it your own. Well, that leads you to Nemesis, where you're deck building from those 2 sources. And then if you're playing Nemesis regularly, locally, or online, with the Vassal community, or however you're interacting with Nemesis, the more Nemesis you play, the more you see of the card pool. So like I might be bringing Fearsome Fortress for myself like all the time, but I'm playing against Toxic Terrors. I'm playing against Void Curse Thralls. I'm playing against Tooth and Claw. These are names of these 32 card decks that are out there. And then maybe I decide, you know what, I've had enough Fearsome Fortress for now. I'm going to build a deck with Daring Delvers. So you start seeing all of these decks that contain the card pool. The card pool is these decks. And so then if you decide to go into Championship, you're already there. You've seen all these cards. You just now get access to them. You get to just build from this entire pool of all these cards you've been seeing.
Yeah,
I think that's really special. I love the ramps that are built in.
Yep. I know when the formats arrived, I had some concerns and skepticism, but I really think it's been a great thing for the game. I think we're about at the end. I think a nice way to close out would be we'll pass it around the horn here and say, if you had a piece of advice for somebody who's just starting out, somebody who's gotten through this episode and they're like, I'm in, I'm going to go do it. What piece of advice are you, like, what words of wisdom are you going to impart to somebody who's about to start out on their Underworlds journey? Brian, do you want to take one first here?
I would say buy Death Gorge or Nether Maze and just give that a go. Basically, just give it a try. It's a low entry point. And just, I would buy, particularly, I would buy Death Gorge. Just buy the current new thing. Nether Maze is still in rotation, but it won't be for much longer.
Okay.
Or Weird Hollow or Gnarlwood. But I would just, I particularly have a fondness for Nether Maze. But by Death Gorge, the current season, I wouldn't go backwards. There is, a nagging feeling of like, oh, the old stuff, like it's not going to be available for much longer. If you get into the game with Death Gorge and you just love it, then consider that further. But first, just start with Death Gorge. I personally got into the game at Beastgrave. I bought Beastgrave Forward. I haven't purchased Night Vault or Shadespire stuff. I've come across and got a few deals here and there, but I'm not a completionist. I don't have that illness.
It's a good illness to have. Am I right, Skylar?
Allegedly.
I'm down with the sickness.
Skylar, what's your advice to somebody who's just starting out?
If you're just starting out, I think the best advice I can give you is, if you know somebody in the game already, to start by getting to play with what they have. But if you can't start there, if you're just starting out, con somebody else into playing the game with you.
Yeah.
I think that would be my number one advice is, just when you set out to play this game, like, have somebody in mind that you're going to be able to play it with. And like, if you think you can get them there, pick up the core box, sit down, or take some time to maybe learn it. If you know that they're not going to want to stumble through it with you. And so that you can kind of be, you can be the teacher, even if that requires you referencing the rule book. I don't think that that's problematic. It's there for you. It's a tool. So I would say try to get somebody else into the game with you, because that's where you're going to, that's what you want to do. Like, you want to be able to play with another human being in person and bond over this great game. But when you set out to do that, there are ways that you can make it easier for that other person. You can split the box with them. You can own the box yourself and hold on to all the components, and just have it with you when you're hanging out with them. You can learn the rule book in advance, or if you know that they're the type of person who's going to enjoy stumbling through something like this with you, go for it.
Totally. My piece of advice is that one of the great things about this game is there's so much to learn, and so be okay with don't get too frustrated if there's mistakes made. If you are playing with somebody who's at the same skill level as you, then fine. If you are jumping into a group of players who are all out, like expect to take your licks early. If people are playing all out, you're gonna take some losses early. But what's awesome is as you kind of move along and develop more and more, there's just so much to learn, so much to develop with this game, so many spots to explore, and so just make sure you enjoy the journey, I guess, as you learn more about the game.
Yeah, the learning curve is steep, but it is also short.
Steep,
if you
but rewarding, right? Like
rewarding, but short in the sense that you'll learn quickly.
Yeah.
If you do try and start online, Vassal is the deep end of the pool. That is where some of the best skilled players around the world congregate. So don't beat yourself up, Bobby.
Yeah, Bobby, the call out there is he is one of our local players who has been on the podcast now. We just had him on. So shout out Bobby. And when he started out, he couldn't get enough of this game. So he found out about Vassal and went and started playing a ton of games there. And he lost a ton of games there. But he kept playing, he kept learning. And we kept telling him, you're playing against some of the best players in the world, man. Don't sweat the losses. I'm gonna beat him. I love the energy that he brings. I told people when we were going to Nova that my goal was to be in the top 8, and he responded. This is literally a conversation we were having at work, with our colleagues. And he's like, "Well, if Skylar is expecting to crack the top 8, then I beat him in practice a bunch, so I'm expecting to crack the top 4." Apparently, just great energy.
Hey, you did better than me.
So, I think that's to say, when you're coming up against experienced players, there's a lot to learn in losing. So have fun in loss. Like, just enjoy the game and your time playing this game with somebody else. Don't be so worried about who's ultimately going to win. Try your best to get there, and enjoy that too. But every time you sit down to play, one of you is going to lose. So be ready for when it's you.
Yeah. Well, all right, gentlemen, does anyone have anything else they want to hit before we depart this episode?
Don't think so.
Hearing none, I'm going to close us out here. You can get in touch with us anytime. We're on Twitter, or I guess X, at WTHcast. I am working on some other social media routes to maybe promote the cast. We'll see. Email is great for us too. whatthehexcast@gmail.com. And even better is the Discord. That's where we're probably the most responsive. There's a link in the show notes where you can just come on and join. If you join soon, you might be the 1,000th person to join our Discord, which I don't think you get anything other than Aaron, our overlords, Aaron, you'll get his eternal gratitude. I don't know, but we love the chat there. You can check out all our content at themortalrealms.com. If you're not aware, we do a blog there. Every new release we cover card by card there. So if we don't have time on the podcast, we cover it there. Thanks to the Greater Mortal Realms Network for having us on. That's awesome to be part of that. And then coming up in future episodes, we are still collecting, expecting for rotation, any Harrow Deep era cards that you are going to be happy or sad to see go. Give us your kind of reminiscences of the Harrow Deep season. As far as what we're going to cover, we have a number of things. Whenever Death Gorge arrives, we're going to be covering that. Obviously, there's a ton to cover there, war bands and decks and all that sort of thing. Hopefully, we'll be getting at you with some battle reports off of that. And we're also going to take a crack at covering some of the background on that. We are part of a narrative gaming network, as I mentioned, the Mortal Realms, and we'd like to make sure we touch on that. So what exactly that looks like is TBD, but it is coming in one way or the other. Brian, you kind of had the wheel on this. You got a flavor text quiz for us?
I do. Are you guys ready?
Yeah, we may need, because when these are wide open, we may need a lot of hints. So that's me trying to cop out right away. But go ahead.
All right. So, fortified by prophecies of success, warriors will rush forward into the most terrible danger.
Wow, is that doesn't sound like it's attributed to anyone. So
it is not. It is from the most recent card pack, Path of Prophecy.
Yeah, that was going to be my contribution. I was going to say they said Brian said prophecy, so it's probably from Paths of Prophecy. Skylar, it's all you from there.
Very astute.
Okay. That
is it the free move one?
Like, I'll give you a hint that there is a grass rack on the front on the art.
Am I remembering what? I can't remember what the art is on that move gambit. What is that? It's like a free move or something like that.
It is.
It's that one?
Yep.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna get there.
Oh, you nailed it.
Yeah. It's not the push, because that was
you've got this.
Slinking in there. No. Shoot, Skylar, do you know that? Can you bring it home for me?
I'm pretty sure I can.
All right, do it.
Is it Tread the Path?
Oh, it is Tread the Path.
It is.
Oh my God. All right.
Yes, come with us. Tread the Path.
All right. Oh, that's a good one. All right.
Yeah.
That's actually how I was able to figure it out.
I'm going to be honest, that art is like so chaotic that I couldn't really tell who was in it. So it is news to me that's Grash Rack. I don't know that I look close enough. That's not Grash Rack.
Grash Rack. What's
Skittershank?
Yeah, it's Grash Rack. Fellhoof.
Fellhoof. Okay.
All I know is he's holding some sort of Skeletor wannabe staff.
You both disappoint me. Like Grash Rack's to spoilers.
My old eyes.
He's got a staff over his head, though, right? I'm picturing this right. And
it is Grash Rack. Gosh darn it!
There's like red orbs around him.
Yeah. I'm focused on the red orbs. Anyway, all right.
The Havoc staff.
Yeah. The other thing we always do is recommended listening, and for this one, Brian, you got something here as well.
So I've recommended The Invitation by Lords of the Trident, local band, power metal band from Madison, Wisconsin.
Amazing. All right. That's going to do it for What the Heck. I've been Davey.
I've been Brian.
And I've been Skylar.
But what about balance? How do they balance the game?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm trying to make natural segues. Trying to take the helm.
Something bosun folksel.
Absolutely. So